He walked past my desk like I wasn't there. Not with arrogance, no, with comfort, like a man so sure the fire he just lit wouldn't touch him. Like someone who had rewritten the story so many times he couldn't remember it was once mine. And I sat there, coffee cold, spine clenched, staring at the back of his smug little neck. The neck of a man promoted on the bones of a woman he called his right hand. The neck of a man who said he couldn't have done it without me, then went on to prove he absolutely could. Until I reminded him I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. They tell you silence is strength, that composure is grace, that good women don't scream when they're stabbed in the back, they bandage themselves and keep clapping. I did that. For 3 years. I smiled through meetings where he pitched my strategies, took notes during presentations based on my models, watched him speak the words I bled for like they were plucked from his own tired brain. And I stayed, because women like me are taught that leaving is weakness, that patience is a virtue, that one day someone would notice, someone would care, someone would say she deserves better. But no one ever does, not really. Not unless you become the storm they can't ignore. It started the day I stopped talking in meetings. I used to be the woman who spoke with numbers, with roadmaps, with prototypes built at 2 a.m. But when I realized every word I spoke became ammunition in his pitch deck, I stopped offering. And they didn't notice I had gone quiet because he got louder, more confident, more presidential. He started to stand when he spoke, wear a blazer that wasn't wrinkled, drop phrases like long-term brand alignment and data-driven storytelling. He even mimicked my pauses the way I'd hold silence like a knife between words. I became invisible, and he became invincible. I remember the first time I realized I was no longer a threat. We were in a quarterly strategy call. He shared a pitch, my pitch, but stripped of all the nuance. It was loud, glossy, but empty. And they loved it. The VP nodded like it was brilliance. The director clapped her hands together. Someone said, "This is exactly the direction we needed." And I sat there frozen, not because he stole, but because he made it prettier. He made it palatable. He turned the razor into a spoon, and they swallowed it whole. He thanked me in passing, like I'd passed him the salt. "You know I couldn't have done it without you," he said. And I almost laughed, because that's what men like him say right before they take everything you built and etch their name on it like blood on stone. I started keeping receipts that night, screenshots, file versions, emails with timestamps, meeting notes. Not out of revenge, out of grief, like a woman saving pieces of a burning house. Not because she'll rebuild, but because she needs to remember it was once hers. There were whispers in the hallway a week later. He was up for promotion. VP maybe. A bigger team, more visibility, a bigger stage to perform on with lines he hadn't written. And I realized something brutal. They weren't going to see me, not unless I made them look. I remember the first time I realized I wasn't a threat anymore. We were in a quarterly strategy meeting, the kind with fake pastries, lukewarm coffee, and men who think collaboration means interrupting you with a louder version of your own idea. He presented a deck, one that looked suspiciously familiar. The colors were different, the layout was glossier, but the framework, the messaging, the backbone. It was mine, almost word for word, and no one noticed. Or worse, they did, and they didn't care. I watched them nod, I watched them smile. Someone said, "This is the direction we've been waiting for." Another added, "Finally some innovation." I wanted to scream, not because I wasn't credited, but because I had made it invisible, because in the effort to be a team player, I had erased myself before they ever had the chance. He looked at me across the table and winked, like we were in on the same secret, like I should be proud. He didn't know. He didn't know that while he was rehearsing my lines in the mirror, I was learning how to burn bridges quietly, how to light matches with a smile. There was a moment weeks later when we were in the elevator alone. He had just come from a lunch with the VP, some fancy place I used to get invited to. "You've really been quieter lately," he said. "I kinda miss your fire." And I just smiled, because I wasn't quieter, I was recording. You learn as a woman in corporate how to document without flinching. You save emails, track changes, version control. You blind copy your future self. Not because you want revenge, but because gaslighting is corporate currency, and you refuse to be bankrupt. Every praise he got was a paper cut, small but deep, and after a while the bleeding doesn't stop. He got more visibility, I got more tasks, he got promoted to client-facing, I got told I was too intense for some rooms. He started talking over me in meetings, not to disagree, but to echo me louder. I once walked into a client meeting he was leading, he didn't expect me to be there. He was walking through a case study, My case study, the one I had built over 6 months, through trial error user testing and 2 nervous breakdowns. He flashed a slide, my slide, with his initials in the footer. I felt my stomach twist, not from rage, but from mourning. I was watching my work wear someone else's name like a tailored suit. That night, I opened a folder on my desktop, named it In Case I'm Not Crazy, and started dropping things in. Screenshots, drafts, voice memos, time-stamped uploads, anything that proved I was here, I made this. People don't understand this kind of grief. It's not just professional, it's personal, it's spiritual. To pour yourself into something, to bleed for it, and then watch someone else take the credit without flinching. It's not just theft, it's erasure. And that kind of theft, it doesn't leave fingerprints, it leaves ghosts. I became a ghost in that office, polite, efficient, unshakable. And he got everything he wanted. New title, corner office, mentions in press releases, invites to panels where he spoke about mentorship and diversity. I watched a man build a throne out of everything I was told would one day reward me. Hard work, loyalty, humility. And it never did, because the game was never built for me to win, only to keep playing. I remember the afternoon it all broke. I overheard him on a call. He was laughing, telling someone how his intern had helped him shape the last campaign. Intern. He meant me. That was the day the grief turned to fire. He called me his intern. After years of midnight strategy decks, after building frameworks that won client contracts, after holding his hand through rebrands, restructures, and recoveries. Intern. That single word didn't just belittle me, it erased me. And that was the moment I stopped grieving. Something broke, but it wasn't me. It was the leash I had tied around my own voice, the one called grace, the one called teamwork, the one called don't make a scene. I untied it. I didn't yell, didn't confront, didn't forward emails with a passive-aggressive FYI. No, I started planning like a woman who had finally realized no one was coming to save her. I reviewed every document, cross-referenced emails, notes, pitch slides, tracked how the language shifted as it moved from my mouth to his. I traced every theft like a forensic specialist. My keyboard became a scalpel. Each folder I organized was another weapon, filed and loaded. And then I drafted one email, just one. Not emotional, not angry, just precise, unshakable, lethal in its calm. I laid out the timeline, attached supporting files, included meeting recordings, design iterations, and metadata that made denial impossible. No accusations, no adjectives, just facts. I didn't CC anyone, no team, no HR, no legal. Just one recipient, the CEO. I remember sitting at my desk before clicking send. My hands were steady. For the first time in years, my heart wasn't racing, because it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclamation, reclaiming my name, my work, my story. And even if nothing came of it, even if he denied, gaslit, spun the narrative, there would be no more pretending. No more silent nods in meetings. No more watching him wear my work like his second skin. The truth was finally loud. I hit send, and then I waited. The next day, the energy shifted. Not drastically, not visibly, but subtly. There were quiet conversations in closed rooms, Slack messages that stopped mid-sentence, glances that lingered a little too long. He passed me in the hallway and said nothing. No smirk, no wink, just a flicker of something close to fear. Later that week, his name disappeared from the keynote invite, then from the internal newsletter. By Friday, he had been reassigned to another division. No announcement, no farewell lunch. Just moved. Like a stain they couldn't scrub clean, so they just rolled a rug over it. They offered me his accounts, said they hadn't realized how central I'd been, that my leadership had always shown quietly. Quietly, as if I'd chosen to whisper. I didn't take the promotion. I didn't want the title or the office or the poison congratulations. I didn't want to be celebrated for surviving what should have never happened. I wanted out. So I left, on my terms. People think revenge is loud, dramatic, explosive. But real revenge is a woman walking away from the fire she used to beg to be warmed by. It's her silence no longer being mistaken for consent. It's an empty inbox where his name used to live. It's the echo of your own voice finally returning to you. I didn't leave with a bang. I didn't draft a farewell email laced with moral superiority. No passive jabs, no thinly veiled warnings. Just a line, thank you for the experience, I'm moving on. And I did. Without bitterness, without ceremony, just breath and space. Because that's what you lose when you stay too long in a place that shrinks you. Air, perspective, the rhythm of your own name said by your own voice. I thought I'd feel vindicated. I didn't. There was no satisfaction in watching him fade into corporate obscurity, no joy in watching them stumble to restructure what I had built. Just stillness, the kind that follows a storm that has finally run out of rage. They sent follow ups, asked me to consult, told me they were reevaluating internal leadership pipelines. I ignored them because I was no longer interested in being part of a system that only valued women after they burned something down to be noticed. I started building something else. Something without ladders, without rooms I had to be invited into, without having to shrink my voice to be heard. A space of my own. It wasn't grand at first. It was small, quiet, unpolished. But it was mine. And every email I wrote, every strategy I launched, every deal I signed was mine. No edits, no theft, no performative praise. Just ownership. Sometimes people ask me if I ever ran into him again. I did, once, at a conference. He looked thinner, older, not in a bad way, just deflated. He saw me, paused, and did a double take. Then looked down, avoided eye contact, walked the other way. And I realized something. It wasn't shame that made him turn. It was recognition. He saw me, finally, as I was. Not the shadow behind him, not the helper, not the intern, but the storm that dismantled his illusion. There's a myth they sell us that if we're good enough, quiet enough, loyal enough, we'll be lifted. That someone will notice. That justice will arrive wrapped in validation and titles and pay bumps. But justice doesn't knock. Sometimes justice is the email you send yourself, the line you finally draw, the place where your silence ends. I don't tell this story because I want applause. I tell it because someone out there is still trying to be patient in a room that's starving her. Someone out there is quietly bleeding brilliance into a man's next promotion. Someone out there is wondering if she's crazy. You're not. You're just waiting too long to send the email. It wasn't one act that saved me. It wasn't even the email. It was every quiet decision I made after. To walk, to stop seeking permission, to build, to speak, and to never again hand over something I bled for. To a man who never knew how much it cost me.